Hello. This is going to be the first of in a series, a number of videos that I'm going to be doing here as a tutorial for the game called Saelig. Saelig, I think it's pronounced. Um, Shout out to my good friend Addercop, the sole developer of this game. I'm just gonna start from the basics here. We're gonna start a new game and go through some of the some of the choices and things that could potentially affect your early game setup. Now I have a set path that I usually like to take, but we're gonna go over all of them on this first video. Now, at the current version, the current most up-to-date version of Sailing, there's not a whole lot of character variation, but Addercop has said that he's working on that. So I'm just gonna pick one here. I'm gonna hit continue. I'm gonna pick a name. I usually like to pick stupid, gross names. Fat Burger Pie. All right. So we got your time settings here. We got day length, which is normal. Normal by default. I usually keep that because when you put them short or long, there's a pretty drastic variation. And when you're just starting out, I recommend just keeping the default settings. But typically, what I do, since I'm a season player, is I usually do 2 days per season and 1 year to pass per 4 seasons, and that gives you. See, we do 1 and 2 days per season. That gives you extra time in each season to do things. This is important later in game when you're trying to get food items, fruits and vegetables. They grow in certain seasons, and if you have more days per season, you have more time to grow them and whatnot. You can do up to 30 and years to pass per 4 seasons. Now, there is a theoretical limit to how long the game can go, and I'll explain more on that later. So the longer you have, you know, to play, the more prosperous you typically could potentially be. So I usually do 1 year for 4 seasons. You have the option to turn player needs on and off, and what this means is your character, if the needs are on, your character will get hungry, they'll get tired, they'll need to sleep, they'll need to eat. But you can turn this off if you want to, and you won't have to deal with that. And we'll go into that later. And the Viking raids are very interesting. They're kind of rare, but the Viking raids, what they are is Vikings will come into your village. They'll pillage, they'll just burn buildings, kill your citizens. If you're just starting out, I recommend turning this option off while you're learning the game, but for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on. Alright, so the first thing that pops up before you can get in game is your story. Your mother brought you into this world and gave you the best start she could. What comes to mind when you think back about her? She cherished all living things, she spent much of her time foraging. All of these options will affect your initial stats when you get into game. So be mindful about what you want to achieve, I suppose. For me, I usually go with she's the best cook in town, and I'll show you why later. Alright, your father played an important role in your life and helped shape who you have become. What was he known for? Again, this is another thing that will affect your initial starting stats. I usually go with his taste, his taste for ale. During your childhood, you got the first glimpse of the kind of life you wanted to lead. What was the first thing you really enjoyed? I really like taking money from others, so we're going to do that. As the years went on, you came to notice how much turmoil there was around you. What did you do to take your mind off things? And usually I like to light fires. The time has finally come for you to step out on your own and say goodbye to your family. What was the last thing you did before you left for good? And usually I like to steal a bag of coins. Your parents were very proud of their heritage and always encouraged you to embrace it as well. So when you tell stories of your ancestors you speak of. Now, this is an important part of it because what your background is gives you certain buffs. And what I mean by buffs is like increased ability like archery or relationship statuses, when you interact with other people. So be mindful, read each one before you just pick one at random. So we got the Steadfast Saxons of Wessex, substantial initial boost to trading, archery, and plus 2 additional relationship point from every interaction. This is a really good starting one because the higher you can get your relationships with other people, the easier it is to buy buildings, sell buildings, get a wife or a husband. Alright, Proud Angles of Mercia, boosted learning rate for craftsmanship, tailoring, and farming. This is really good if you don't care about relationships and you just want to get to work and make money. The Ancient Britons of the Land, boosted learning and production rate for herbal items, and a very high immunity to mild illness. Now, I have had playthroughs where my main character gets very sick very often. So this would be a good one if you're worried about sickness, because keep in mind, your character can die for being sick if you don't have medicine, or you don't have clothing, or a fire to sit by, or sleeping properly, or food. Everything kind of plays together in Saelig, so if you're worried about sickness, Ancient Britons of the Land is a good one to start with. And then we have the Hardy Folk of Northumbria. You'll have to excuse me, I'm still recovering from being sick for the past week. Substantial initial boost to fitness and hauling, and the cold of winter will have much less of an effect on you. This is a good one for early game, specifically for the fitness and hauling. And the reason for that, we'll get into that in later videos, is when you're trying to move product around, what you get for each of your businesses that you own is something called a cart. And they are not autonomous when you first get them, so your character or one of your employees will have to physically haul the cart around the land to move product around or to sell things. Later in the game, that's not so much of a problem once you've gone through the upgrade cycle and whatnot, but for initial starting out, that's a good one for that. Personally, I don't use it, just because I know the path that I'm going to take, but if you're just starting out, it's a good one. And then we have the Fierce Danes who came to raid. So substantial initial boosts to melee and waylay, and all charms will last longer for you. For those that don't know, the Danes are where the Vikings, the Danish are where the Vikings originated from, and we get Viking raids in here, so it makes sense that they would have melee and waylay ability. For me though, I'm probably gonna start off with Saxons of Wessex. Alright, your story is set. Now you must step out and choose your new home. Now we have 4 different maps here as of recording this. I don't know if Addercop actually plans on expanding this map or not, but it used to be only 2, so we have quite a few options. Now for the purposes of this playthrough, we're going to choose, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just click on all of them. Wilton Skier. This is my favorite starting place. I don't think it's the largest map, but it is my favorite one. Let's see, East Saxna and Cantwell. This is my current playthrough is set in this one. This East Saxna and Cantwell is the map that a few years down the line there's a war and another town opens up to you. So if you're looking for a big map, this is I believe this is the biggest one, the easiest one to get set up on. Whitland, this is Addercop's favorite map. This was the original, the OG map that came out when Saelig was first developed and put on Steam. It's a good one. I've played a couple playthroughs on it. It's not much different than the other ones. However, Hampton Skier is, I think it's the newest one, but it's the smallest map. There's only one town. There's 2 towns, but only 1 trading center. So this would be the most difficult one to get really rich on if you're playing an economy game like I usually do. But if you're just wanting to play, you know, a peaceful game, have a little fun, this is probably a good one to start with. And actually, I think we'll go ahead and start here. I probably should have explained a little bit more about the different options. You have your standard beginning, which is, we'll go back. But getting back to the different areas, I guess we could, I will just use this one as a good example. So we have your standard beginning here, and that's the one that I just showed you. You start out with 4,000 gold, a house, and nothing else, and it's up to you to determine what you want to do. And then we have the traveling trader. It says here, start in the wilderness with a few coins and a pack of goods. Can you make your fortune walking the roads and selling wares? You don't have a house or anything, you just got a pack of goods. This one's fairly difficult to start out with, especially if your goal is to establish a business. Now, beggar is the most difficult one. This is basically the hardest difficulty. You can think of all these different beginnings as difficulty levels, at least early on in the game. Beggar's going to be the most difficult. You don't have any money, you don't have any food, you don't have a house or a business. You're basically essentially just begging and hoping that the people of the town are generous. And something to keep in mind is that every time you start a new playthrough, every time the AI is generated, every playthrough is going to be completely different. You might get lucky with a town that's generous, and the beggar start might not be so bad, or else it could be brutal, and you'll end up dying. I've had a couple playthroughs where I've died. You can also start out as an employee. I've never done this one, so I don't know if you start out with a house or not, but you don't start out with a whole lot of gold, or silver, I suppose. You can do a business owner start, which I've done a couple of times. The business that you get in the beginning is randomly generated, so you don't know what type of business you're going to have. It could be a bakery, it could be an ale house, it could be a metal worker, it could just be a mine or a field. And then you have your landlord, where you start out owning a few properties that are for rent. And from what I understand, a lot of people choose the landlord route anyways because it's the easiest. It's probably the easiest way to generate passive income in the game. So that's a good way to get passive income in early game. I like to challenge myself sometimes though, so I have played a couple of landlord starts, but I usually don't like to. And then you have your hunter, where you just start out in the woods. You got your pack, you got your bow and arrow, and you just hunt. And you skin the animals, sell the pelts, and that's how you make your money. That's a fairly difficult start. It's not the most difficult. Beggar would be the most difficult. But there you have it. There's the early basics of the game, and I will be back with the second episode about early actual gameplay.